Hey there, welcome to Training with Kayce. I'm your host, Kayce Cover, and there's been something on my mind a lot for the last week, and I'd really like to start a discussion on it. And really, I wish that there were people here right now so that we could actually talk about this. And what the subject is is there a need for punishment? Now, that's such a complicated question because people hear different things when you say the word punishment. So I tend to think about it from the perspective of operant conditioning. And in operant conditioning, a punisher isn't a bad thing. And some people will say, oh, it's something aversive. It doesn't even have to be aversive. It just is something that decreases the frequency of the behavior it immediately follows. So, yeah, maybe if you did something I didn't like and I sprayed you with cold water, or I, uh, gave you a shock from an electric collar, or I popped your leash or something like that. That could be things that you didn't like, or you didn't appreciate. But let's give you a different scenario. Let's say that you're my assistant and you pack my supplies to go on seminar trips. And I get to one of the seminar locations and I don't have the papers that I need. Maybe I don't have my videos, let's say. And that's really bad. So I get back to the office after that trip and I talk to you and I say, you are the best assistant I have ever had. When I arrived there and didn't have what I needed, I knew that something unexpected came up or something went wrong. How can I partner with you so that we don't have this problem again? And let's say we take that step and make sure that we don't have the problem. I just diminished the frequency of the behavior of forgetting to put the supplies in the bag correctly. But most of the people, when we talk about that particular solution, agree that that's not at all aversive. In fact, they find it many times inspirational. People will often say, can I come work for you? Well, talk to the people that do work for me before you do that, because it's not all easy. We work hard and we work intensely, but it is fun and it is interesting and we get a lot done. Okay, so a punisher does not have to be aversive. It doesn't have to be demeaning or painful or torturous or threatening. It doesn't have to involve fear or pain or suffering or anxiety. It can just be a consequence. And newsflash, if you're somebody that thinks you don't work in that quadrant, you're wrong. You've got to breathe in and out. If you use the intermediate bridge, which is a very subtle but effective reinforcer, when you quit using the intermediate bridge, that's probably a little bit of a letdown to that animal. And that could be a punisher. And if you want to see it be a punisher, take a look at the Sue Ketland video with Squidgy, where She's asking him to put his head on the ground, and she starts the intermediate bridge, or X, I forget which. And he's got his head plastered to the ground, and then he starts to lift his head. And Sue immediately stops the intermediate bridge. And Squidgy looks a little like, hmm? And then puts his head down on the ground like he suddenly realized, oh, yeah, he corrects himself immediately because when he stops hearing that bridge, he realizes that he is no longer headed for success. So it diminishes the behavior of his head popping up. So we can say, according to operant conditioning, that was punished. And Sue didn't do anything except for tell him when he was correct. Okay. So it's so difficult to talk about this subject because people get all, oh my gosh, all emotional. There's so much baggage and righteous and judgmental of others. Newsflash, I don't care how good you are, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to be human. You're going to be in a situation where your dog does something he knows better than to do, and he hurts you or he scares you to death, and you're going to react not as a professional trainer, but as a human being who's trying to get through the day. And that might happen with your kids too. And that's life. And I wish we could be more realistic with one another and less judgmental. And that goes in a lot of different ways. So, not only, uh, not to think that, oh, I can train an animal without punishment and you can't, but also just, trusting the animals to keep striving and to understand, and that we can apologize to them sometimes if we do it wrong. But we keep trying to do it well and to support them so that, to help them perform errorless learning and self correction. And in order to do that, we have to be honest about things. We're all working in all the quadrants because you have to turn things off and on. That's what a trainer does. That's what a trainer does. And the nuances are crazy. So let's say, um, pick a punisher, pick a reinforcer, and you're going to find an animal that isn't punished by that thing or isn't reinforced. So let's say you are going to get a high value treat and you pick chicken because a lot of dogs just love chicken or love chicken livers or whatever. Well, my dog is very allergic to chicken. That's not going to be a good reinforcer for my dog. All right. So, anyway, I don't want to get too far involved in that. Let's go on. So, the first thing is we have to realize that a punisher in operant conditioning is just something that decreases the frequency of a behavior. And it doesn't have to have any other bad side effects. However, if it doesn't decrease the frequency of the behavior, it's not a punisher. No matter if you yell at the animal and punish the animal or interrupt the animal, that's a big one right there. You can interrupt an animal's behavior. Let's say the animal suddenly lunges at another dog and you've got the animal on a lead and you pull back and stop that dog from lunging. And you stop that behavior right then. But the next opportunity, the animal lunges again. You interrupted the behavior, you did not diminish it. Given the opportunity, it is repeated every time. Okay. So It doesn't matter if the animal was uncomfortable. It doesn't matter if the animal squealed. If he repeats that behavior as if you hadn't acted on it, then that animal was not punished. Now, for all these and more good reasons, we need to change the word. It's ridiculous to use the term punisher. It's a bad choice because it is a layperson vernacular word, and we should use a more specific word such as diminisher. We use a diminisher instead of a punisher, and we would get rid of all this baggage and so on. Now, I want to cover another aspect of prejudice with punishment. And I remember a trainer that presented a dog that he had harshly used an e-collar with. But he said to everybody, look, I saved this dog's life. And this is the only way you could save this dog's life is with this e-collar, even if it's used harshly. And then he said the thing that was a fatal mistake, in my opinion. He said, and if anybody else tries to tell you differently, they are lying. Really? Because I saw problems like that day in and day out, and I don't use an e-collar. In fact, I don't use any punishers on the animal at all, or even any diminishers. So I had to take exception. And I really felt like by overextending himself, by stating unequivocally that he knew the only way you could do this, just told me more about him. He wasn't so advanced as he thought he was. Because let me just tell you something that I know when you think about it, you're going to know that this guy was wrong. I work with exotic animals, and we can't put e-collars on them. And yet, after training, I could go in with many of the exotic animals that might have otherwise been dangerous, right? Swimming with my sea lions, with dolphins, going in with the seals, going in with the cheetahs. It goes on and on. So the prejudices about punishers, that they're bad, that they're wrong, that we shouldn't even say the word no because we'll traumatize the animal. Or conversely, that we must be allowed to have punishers because there is no other way that we can train these animals. And if we can't train them, then more will die, which is true. If we cannot train animals so that they can live successfully with people, they're not going to have a very good chance of a healthy, long life. Okay. So when I was young, people, dog trainers, had in general a very cut and dry attitude about training. You told the animal what to do. And when I say you told them, you didn't even explain it. Okay. This is my biggest problem because I worked with and for some brilliant trainers, and they had developed a lot of good ways to do things. But I grew up on Bill Keeler's methods. And I knew the dogs that he trained. He did a beautiful job. And these dogs were so, gosh, they were poised. They were well behaved. They were smart. They were capable. They were not abused acting at all. They were like ambassadors for Dogland. And hey, these were Irish setters. Were the ones I met, the Red Arrow Irish setters. And these dogs were amazing. and they were all trained by Mr. Keeler. And Mr. Keeler was an expert at figuring out how to break a task down into pieces. And he broke them into pieces so that the dog could learn each piece in a logical size step, but also so that the dog would become convinced that he wanted or needed to do things the way the trainer needed him to do things. So, for example, he has a brilliant protocol for how to teach a dog to be cooperative and reliable off lead. And it is very, very good. And it is the basis for the cycles that I teach. It's not the same, okay? But it inspired what I teach in perception modification. Very, very powerful. Okay, so when I was young, there was a need to punish because they didn't have a way, or this is one reason. One reason was they didn't have a way to explain to the animal what they wanted, what was wanted by the trainer. So the animal would go into a situation with a trainer, for example, on a lead, walking next to him, and the trainer would start walking, but then suddenly change direction. And if the animal didn't anticipate the change of this trainer, then they were going to get a leash pop. And it didn't take long, but the dogs would learn to watch so that they didn't end up in those situations where they would get their head popped. Now, when the dogs got trained by these corrections, it did save a lot of lives. Excuse me. Mr. Keeler helped save the lives of thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands of dogs. He would help a lot of dogs that were in the shelters and retrain them so that they could have good lives in homes. It saves lives for other animals too. For example, when I was at the National Zoo and working with gray seals, they started out very aggressive. They would look for opportunities to lash out and bite. And I needed to be able to work safely with them because if I got bitten and had to, take time off from work and I couldn't do my job and so on, then I wouldn't be allowed to train them. Or if it was considered too dangerous to be with them, I wouldn't be allowed to train the marine mammals. Well, that's a problem because at least back then, there was a 50% chance of dying with routine anesthesia. So if you have marine mammals in managed care, you're going to need to take their blood values and, check their liver function and, their eyes, all this stuff. You're going to have to examine them usually every year. And if you can't teach them to cooperate, you're going to have to anesthetize them. And they have a 50% chance of dying with routine anesthesia. Who wants to do that? So instead, I taught them to cooperate with the vets, with the scientists, so they could cooperate in their own care. Well, that worked. That worked. And in the 8 years I was at National Zoo, a nearby aquarium that also had gray seals. While we didn't lose a single animal, that's not true. We lost one animal to a freak accident. But other than that, how many did we have? We pretty soon had 5 or 6 gray seals and 7 sea lions. And we lost one sea lion to a freak accident, and that was it. Okay. But our sister aquarium lost 2 females near the term of their pregnancies to routine anesthesia. So that amounted to about half of their animals. It is worth a little bit of strain, stress, punishment to get an animal to the point where they can cooperate in their own care, because it is so important. And obviously, it is better to have a bad day and a good long life than to never be exposed to a training stress and die in, your prime because they had to use anesthesia because they wouldn't tell you no. That's ridiculous. And I have literally heard professional trainers say that, for example, with an e-collar, that a dog was better off being euthanized than ever being exposed to an e-collar. What? That's crazy. I've been exposed. I've exposed myself to e-collars, and I've exposed myself to plenty of electric fences, and they are much more stringent than an e-collar generally. And it doesn't even hurt. It just jars the heck out of me. It kind of blocks my ability to think at the moment. And it's just like, blah, it's an interrupt. So anyway, when I was young, I used punishment, and I absolutely believed it was necessary. And it was necessary because I didn't have a better way to do it. I didn't have a better way to do things. But as I got old, oh, wait, I got to tell you one other thing. So I mentioned gray seals and their cooperation with veterinarians and so on. But here's a situation you might not have thought about. I trained monkeys to be aids for quadriplegics. And here's a weird thing that could happen with monkeys. Back then, if anybody alleged that an animal bit them, they were not required to show proof of an injury. Okay? And the animal might have to be tested for rabies. Now, working with monkeys, in particular capuchin monkeys, there was a strange behavioral thing that the monkeys would tend to do. And that is that all of a sudden they would lunge out at the person and scratch them. And it happened so fast that I couldn't tell exactly what happened. And when it happened, we found out from, looking after the fact and so on, that there was no bite. The monkey didn't actually bite anybody. It just scratched with their fingernails. So it's kind of like a cat clawing out, like, get out of here. The monkey could get killed because it did that. Because somebody could believe they got bitten, but they might think, oh, I pulled away just in time. Well, you and I know that's not really possible. The animals are very, very fast, and if they can scratch you, they can bite you. So if you don't have a bite mark on you, you did not get bitten. But the law didn't protect the animal that way. So I use punishment to teach animals not to do that, not to succumb to that temptation. Because if they did, it could cause their immediate death. There would be nothing I could do about it. So these are 3 cases where I use punishment, and I absolutely believe that I was, um, uh, can't think of the word now. Help me out here, guys. Not authorized to do it, justified, right? Justified. Now, it also started me in a way of looking at animals that I have left behind now, but caused me to be harsher than I needed to be. So, with the exotic animals, I've told you about capture myopathy before, and I, of course, did not want to ever cause an animal to go into that kind of a situation where they were stressed enough that they just shut down and gave up the ghost. So as I learned more and more how to motivate animals and how to explain things and how to align them, I didn't need to use punishment. In fact, recently we had a discussion in class about, is it even necessary? Because when I was working with exotic animals, I became pretty expert at using punishment. There's rules about using punishment. There's rules about timing. There's understandings of how much punishment to use and how to use it, and various other things. And it's hard. It is currently difficult for a new trainer to get the opportunity to learn these basic skills. And so my question was, we don't need these very often. Do we need to teach them? And that's where we are today. Do we need punishment? Because I already told you that with perception modification, we can turn around almost everything, and we don't use any physical punishment or punishment devices, and we don't use extrinsic food or toys or anything on that side of the spectrum either. So, where does that leave us? Recently, I have come to the conclusion that yes, we do need to teach trainers how to be experts in the subject of punishment. And that is because there are certain individuals that could do the thing right and choose not to. They choose not to align with the trainer's goals and purpose, and they will work against the trainer. We don't see it very often, but when you see it, you need a different strategy. There are a few dogs that when you say, okay, the person is going to come 2 steps closer, and the dog, instead of stealing their intention so that they can stay calm while this dog is coming closer, will wait calmly until the animal comes as close as they're going to come, suddenly lunge out and try to get them. And if you then tell them, okay, now this person is going to come 1 step closer instead of 2 steps, they'll lunge out faster because you already told them. So in other words, we use name and explain with all these dogs, and it almost always is fantastic and helps them to improve their behavior. But there's a small subgroup of dogs that will use the information and name and explain in order to hack the system. hack the training system. And I talked in another podcast about our horse Affair, who just decided that she was didn't want to put up with the farrier and cocked her leg to kick him. And he was very fair about it and so on, but he just hauled off and hit her flat on the side, as in, no, stop that now. And she did. And she adjusted her attitude, which she has to do because it is not safe if a horse is thinking that they're going to solve a problem by kicking a person. They are just going to end up being euthanized. Not a solution, not now, not ever. And the farrier, he wasn't angry. He wasn't harmful. He wasn't, I was about to say punishing. He was punishing, but you know what I mean? He wasn't, berating her or torturing her, inflicting pain or anything else. He just stopped her right then. He used exactly the right amount of force so that she just didn't want to go there again. So remember, I said there's issues of timing and there's also issues of amount. You have to punish effectively in both the timing and the amount of force or other consequence that's used. So lately, I have been watching the behavior of humans in politics. And I am seeing individuals boldly and brashly lie. It's against the law to lie where they're lying, but they lie anyway. Steal, misrepresent things, humiliate people, better themselves at the expense of other people. It goes on and on and on. And they need to be held accountable. When I was young, if I held the animals accountable, let's say the gray seals, when we first started working together, and I remember Gunnar in particular decided he was going to take me to court. And we had an interchange. And at the end of it, neither one of us wanted to go through that again. And the next time we met, I was like, Gunnar, how are you today? And he was, well, Miss Kayce, I'm fine. How are you today? And I said, can we continue as friends? And he said, I would like to try that. And so we did, and we became very good friends. And he never, he wasn't a traitorous animal. He once he agreed to be colleagues, he was a good colleague. But until we came to that agreement, he was a bad colleague. And he would have and could have damaged me severely. And to his own detriment, because remember, the big reason I had to be able to work right with them is because we needed to be able to do this, these behaviors that the vets needed without anesthesia. And this is still a problem because people have been taken out of contact with elephants and they've been taken out of contact with orcas, and not sure that I agree with either one of those. Now, I worked with elephants myself both ways, and there's a lot we can get done with elephants with protected contact, and you pretty much have to do that with male elephants. But in my opinion, the jury is still out. There are some fantastic programs for elephants in, free contact. And I have the privilege of knowing many fantastic elephant trainers. And gosh, when you work directly with animals, it is so wonderful for everybody, not just for me because I get to go in with the animal and work more closely with it, but also for the animals. It's just a rich and interesting and rewarding way to be together. So, what would I do now? What I would do now is put an animal behind a barrier. I would train from, for example, with the sea lions outside the exhibit until we had enough relationship that I could start to transition safely into the exhibit. And even there, then I would work behind boards or other deterrents until we establish safety. And that would take longer, but it would require less skill on the parts of the trainers, and it would be less risky in certain ways. But here's the thing. At some point, the animal could always push the issue. Okay? They could always push the issue. And if you understand punishment and so forth and wield it fairly and effectively, my experience is once you establish yourself with the animal, it never came back on me. I never had to do it again. So there you go. And what I'm seeing with some, like I mentioned the dogs that uh, decide they're going to beat the system rather than use the information I give them to work with the system successfully. And now I'm seeing that wide scale, not amongst young guys that are coming out of puberty, but amongst middle-aged and even old men and women that really should know better, that are they've grown up without consequences and they don't have any respect for consequences. And that is a dangerous situation. And as a matter of fact, consider this, because you may know some of these people too. I have known some people that did not manage themselves. They would use some people might say, oh, they're narcissists. And sometimes they were, but sometimes they were also just very strong-willed people that if you didn't stand up to them, they would wear you down and, take over things. And there were all these people that would be resentful of this strong person and, not like them, speak against them behind their back and so forth. But there's another option. You can just stand up to these people and you can just give them consequences. You can hold them accountable. And by being able to do that, you can actually be their friend and not allow them to take advantage and not allow them to boss you around. I remember a situation with a wonderful friend. I really valued this person and I really enjoyed the friendship. And this was a very strong-willed person. And I went to visit and we had dinner. And then after dinner, she said, well, we have to go downtown and feed the feral cats and the feral dogs. Well, downtown, where she was talking about, was an area of the town that I did not consider safe. And it was 10 o'clock at night. And she was going to go in this dark alley in an unsafe part of town and tool around and feed cats and dogs. And I said, no. And then the, attempts to convince me came. Oh, yeah, surely it's not a problem. You won't have a problem. It's perfectly safe. I've been doing it for this long. No. And then we can do this, and then we can. No, no. If you're going to go, I'll wait here for you or I'll leave. I'm not going. Sometimes we have to stand up to others in order to be around them safely. Like I didn't consider it safe to go with that person and not hold my own. Not I wasn't going to go feed the cats and dogs in the middle of the night. Okay. So, this discussion is about punishment. Does it have a place in animal training? Even though we have excellent ways to teach and we generally don't need to punish. And yet, it may actually be necessary to always have a deterrent. And I can think of so many cases, really, just so many cases where the people do have a deterrent all the time. They may never use it, but they have it. Come on, it'd be crazy otherwise. If you go in the woods and walk in the woods all the time, yeah, take some bear spray with you. Take a boat horn with you. If you're going downtown with your dog, do those things. You need safety backups, and hopefully you'll never have to use them. But you sure don't want to get caught in a situation where you encounter a bear and have nothing to protect yourself with if the bear decides to ignore you pounding on your little pie tins and raising your hands over your head going, no, go away. Yeah, if it doesn't work, you're going to want something a little stronger so you can hold your own. Okay, folks, think about those things. Let me know what you think. Because, when it comes right down to it, we are stewards for these animals to help them into successful lives with people. And we need to prepare them for lots of eventualities, lots of things they don't understand. If you've got monkeys, the monkey doesn't understand about the law. They may be able to get rid of that person by scratching at them. They don't understand the consequences of the law. So I need to convince them otherwise. And if my gray seals are going to get their exams done without anesthesia, which could be fatal to them, then I have to be able to hold sway with them where it comes to don't bite if I do these things. Now, and like I said, as we did the training and so forth, things changed and we became trusted colleagues and so on. You guys remember the story of Lila's eyes. Oh my gosh, what an amazing situation. If you haven't heard that one, that's just one of the most amazing experiences of my life with animals. Okay, think about it. Let me know what you decide. But maybe it is time to bring consequences to the front. It is not okay for people or animals to trespass on the rules of right. right way of being with others, fairness, ethicalness, and so on. And maybe there need to be consequences that are upheld all the way up to the Supreme Court, period. Thank you all. Take care. See you next time.